Number 1. I was spending a month with my cousin at my grandma's house. It was August, and my cousins' ages ranged from 10 to 15, me being the oldest at 15. We would stay up late telling scary stories. But one night, a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire out back. My grandma's house is in a rural suburb. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house. But in the backyard, it's thick forest, with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was actually underground. That isn't important until later, though. We are toward the east side of her yard in a smallish patch of open land. You couldn't see the neighboring yards from there, and there was probably 3/4 mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandma. It was maybe 11 o'clock at night, and we were playing Truth or Dare after telling scary stories. My 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to walk through the paths for 10 minutes or so. I said yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed. But my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet, and we could see enough not to die. We were walking through the paths for about 5 minutes and could barely see the fire through the trees when we decided to turn. In the middle of the path was a large dog-like creature, hunched over with its front hands an inch from the ground. What I remember most was how its eyes were so fucking bright white, and it was a humanoid dog shaped with a human-like head but a dog-like body with human hands and feet. It looked right at us, and I know I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away the opposite way from us toward a creek that ran through the yard. Eventually, my cousin and I screamed bloody murder, and the other cousins and my grandma ran to us. I don't remember much here because I was really disoriented and I couldn't think properly, but I did wake up in bed, so I assumed that I was brought up to the house. All the kids slept in the basement, in a big room with a sliding glass door to the outside, as the room was on the side that wasn't underground. My bed was pressed against a big glass window, and I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house is in Michigan, so it gets slightly chilly even in the end of August. And there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and ran to join them outside. Before I could even join them, I realized that they weren't playing at all, but rather running to get my grandma. Her dogs, both of them, were dead, ripped apart. That night we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 in the morning because I felt like something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting on the double bed opposite me on the other side of the room. Now there was 1 bunk bed and 2 double beds. The double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were being quiet and staring at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head toward the window, and I froze. They all looked afraid. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I saw a really messed up face pressed up against the window, looking down at me with gaping eyes. I screamed at the top of my lungs and ran. My grandma called the police after I told her what happened, and they found nothing. I went home after that, and I have never been there again during the night. Number 2. I've heard a lot about coyotes and skinwalkers. and had a weird experience or two with coyotes. Creepiest was waking up to my sleeping bag being surrounded in paw prints, but never once hearing them through the night. But never anything paranormal. My friend's story, however, kept me from going back to a favorite backcountry spot. So he was leaving the area one morning. He had been camping there a couple days and said there was a coyote that had always been close by, like in his peripheral vision, but never overt. He loaded up his truck and started to drive down the washout to the fire road. At the end of the wash, he could see the coyote following him. When he pulled onto the road, it was running next to him. Now he was freaked out, so he sped up. At this point, he was going 35 miles an hour or so, and it was running along beside him. Definitely not realistically possible. When he looked back, the coyote was running on 2 legs and was wearing what my friend said looked like buckskin pants. In an instant later, it was a person wearing a coyote fur, keeping pace with his truck. And when he looked again, it was gone. Number 3. I was visiting my grandparents in Shiprock, New Mexico. It was October, and I wanted to see family and to go to the Northern Navajo Nation Fair. Many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. However, I grew up away from the Navajo Nation, and I was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell a story of how back in the 80s when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft, burnt orange glow. Me, being my own close-minded self, doubted every word, but I never voiced my doubts out loud. These doubts were totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house. Myself and my family had just finished going to the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up till 2 in the morning catching up about family affairs and local news. It was during that time that I just opened my mouth and said, "Hey, are skinwalkers real?" "Guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandmother said with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decided to go to bed. After being scolded by my mother, one of my aunts chimed in with a very cautious tone and said, "They're real, all right." Had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the entire night and woke up crying the next morning. Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all went to bed. And now this trailer/home is pretty old. And it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except for me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers. As a kid, I was told it was taboo to even think about skinwalkers because it can still call their attention. And that's when the shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was settling in and finally getting relaxed enough to go to sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I got up and wandered over to the kitchen window. All of the lights were out, except for the one from the porch. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground, the vehicles that my family drove, and some metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything. So I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something. I had only taken 2 steps when I heard what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside, very close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring in my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked wrong and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray, with very disheveled hair and a horrific orange-red soft glow coming from its eyes. I ran back to the bedroom. It was at this moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was immediately annoyed at me because it was almost 3 a.m. and asked me what I wanted. I immediately began in a shaken voice, "There's something outside." Then she said, more annoyed, "It's probably just a stray cat or something. It's the res. Animals wander at night all the time." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on outside, Ma." And that got her attention. What the hell are you talking about?" she asked. Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful-like screams. And started what sounded like thrashing outside on the ground. You hear that? That's what I'm talking about. So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it were handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and made this odd muffled moaning sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away and telling it wasn't welcome there. All the commotion woke everyone else up, and they all came out into the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them, say "Skinwalker," and pointed at the door. They already knew exactly what to do. My grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door. Yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend, he swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. "What if it comes back tomorrow? It saw us." Doesn't that mean we're targets now? Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everyone down, and we all went to bed. When morning came, my grandparents called one of their neighbors to explain what had happened. One of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Yebiche's Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each family member in the grounds outside. Today, I'm very convinced that what I saw was a skinwalker. I still plan on going back for visits to the family and the Northern Navajo Nation Fair. I just adamantly hope that I never have such an awful experience again. Number 4. My grandmother on my mother's side has always been very superstitious, for lack of a better word. One year, when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit was pretty uneventful. Typical boring old people stuff. Except she always kept her curtains drawn and would always peek out the window. And when someone asked her what she was doing, she would simply reply, "You know, Lucy is watching me." This went on for nearly the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandmother and my little brother were in the front yard that evening planting flowers, when all of a sudden, my grandmother starts yelling at my little brother to get away from that creature. It's not safe. Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake. So we all ran outside to see my grandmother clutching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house. Standing out in the yard was a large, black, Great Dane-sized dog, staring at my grandmother with an intensity I've never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and bounded off. I don't recall if it moved unusually fast or not, but I do remember it had really deep yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating, "The Yenald Lucy has found me." She moved a couple of weeks after that. Number 5. I decided to join my bestie Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's house on the res. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested to know about Navajo tradition. The first day we stayed, it was pretty chill. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then her grandma, around 67, said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. To me, it did kind of act strangely, looking back at it now. Black, shaggy coat, looked like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. That night, we were watching a movie in the living room. It had big windows that looked out into the front where the cars were parked. Nothing fancy, with the curtains wide open. Her grandmother was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and we were watching a movie. Next to the window is a medium bookshelf where the DVDs were kept. Karen went to put back a DVD we had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on the top of the wood box outside, not something normal dogs would do from my point of view or hers. Usually my dog, which is a house dog, scratches the door to be let in. Res dogs aren't house dogs, and dogs inside houses are frowned upon in Navajo tradition. They're meant to protect the house and the owner. The other dogs seemed to stay away from it. Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off the box, and it ran off behind the shed. We went into Tuba City to get some groceries, came back to the house. The dog was nowhere to be seen, nothing unusual. Her grandmother went to visit some people, so it was just Karen and I. At about 5 o'clock, we heard something or someone trying to open the door. Both of us looked out, since there had been no car heard and no dogs barking. Looking out the living room window to the door, there was a dog trying to open the door with its paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but it didn't really freak me out. But it freaked out Karen. She opened the door and chased it off. Later, as we got ready to sleep, there was a sound coming from the top of the roof. Pitter, patter, footsteps, and scratching sounds and panting. It then sounded like it jumped off the roof onto the large plastic water barrel they had. At first we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dogs seemed to be barking at something also. All of a sudden, something was running around the house, barking. At first we thought it was a dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human, like a deep male voice barking like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. Just like that. It was adding W's and R's and panting again by the window, and we started to freak out. Karen decided to open the curtains to look out, and there was the stray dog on its hind legs, looking into our bedroom, but this time it stunk, and what I thought were 2 black holes in the neck. Another pair of eyes twinkled. Think of those ugly, glossy spider eyes looking at you, and the paws were deformed, looking like hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. We both screamed, which immediately led to her grandmother running in and seeing it. The first thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, load 3 shells into the shotgun from under her bed, blessed herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it, yelling in Navajo about how the thing wasn't welcome there and to get the hell out of there, for it to linger somewhere else. She called the medicine man the next day. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather, blessed the house, made us eat bitter herbs called eagle's gull or something, and gave me an arrowhead. Apparently I needed to carry one for protection, and a little pouch called corn pollen. The medicine man said the dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, made an illusion so we wouldn't know it wasn't a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of human bone straw to spit at someone. The medicine man pulled a piece of human skull out of her grandmother's right shoulder, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick.